I learned about my son's wedding not through a phone call, a visit, or a piece of heavy cardstock in the mail, but through a text alert from my bank. Did you authorize a charge of $45,000 at the Grand Horizon Hotel? I was sitting at my kitchen island sipping my morning coffee when the screen of my phone lit up with the message. I did not gasp. I did not drop my mug. I simply set it down and opened my banking app. There it was, sitting in the pending transactions of my premium black card. A massive deposit for a venue I had never visited, authorized by the secondary cardholder, my son David. David had possessed that card for 5 years. I gave it to him shortly after my husband passed away. At the time, David was struggling to keep his small logistics business afloat, and I wanted him to have an emergency safety net. Over the years, he used it sparingly, a car repair here, a last-minute flight there. He always paid me back. But lately the charges had shifted. Expensive dinners, designer boutiques. I knew exactly who was inspiring this new lifestyle. Jessica. She was the woman David had left his first wife for. A pragmatic, sharply dressed woman who looked at my modest, paid-off suburban home with thinly veiled pity. She liked expensive things, and clearly she had convinced my son that my credit line was the perfect way to fund them. I checked the calendar. The date of the hotel booking was exactly 3 weeks away, a Saturday. I opened my email, checked my physical mailbox, and even looked at the bulletin board where I pinned family notices. Nothing. My only son was throwing a lavish wedding with his mistress, funding it with my money, and he had not even bothered to invite me. I did not call him to scream. I did not text him to demand an explanation. I picked up the phone, dialed the number on the back of my card, and navigated the automated menu. I had a wedding to prepare for, even if I wasn't on the guest list. The disrespect did not start with the wedding. It had been building for 2 years, ever since Jessica firmly planted her expensive shoes in David's life. They treated my home like a free storage unit and my time like a public resource. Just last month, Jessica had dropped her 2 chaotic terriers at my house without asking. David said you wouldn't mind, Evelyn. We have a wine tasting upstate. She had announced, dropping the leashes on my porch before I could even open the screen door. When I told her I had plans, she just waved a manicured hand. Oh, just cancel them. You're retired. What could be so urgent? I spent that weekend cleaning muddy paw prints off my carpets. I didn't argue. I simply noted the boundary they had crossed and realized that my silence was being mistaken for weakness. The $45,000 charge was just the deposit. I knew how these luxury hotels operated. The final balance, likely double that amount, would be charged on the day of the event, usually right after dinner, before the late-night festivities began. I logged into my account on my laptop. I could have canceled the card right then. But if I did, David would just scramble, find another way to manipulate his friends or his savings, and still get his perfect day. He would learn nothing. Jessica would learn nothing. Instead, I packed up the boxes of winter clothes and old sports equipment David had been storing in my basement. I stacked them neatly in the garage. Then I called a local locksmith and scheduled an appointment for the weekend of the wedding. I reviewed my finances. My husband had left me comfortable, but I had worked hard as an accountant for 30 years to build my own nest egg. I respected money. David, under Jessica's influence, only respected the appearance of it. I marked the date on my kitchen calendar with a simple black pen. They wanted my money, but not my presence. I decided I was going to give them neither. The Saturday of the wedding arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze. I spent the morning tending to my garden, pulling weeds from the rose bushes. I felt remarkably calm. At 4 in the afternoon, I went upstairs and opened my closet. I bypassed the pastel dresses typically worn by mothers of the groom. Instead, I pulled out a tailored dark charcoal suit. It was understated, elegant, and entirely unbothered. I paired it with my comfortable leather flats and a single pearl necklace. I drove my 10-year-old sedan across town to the Grand Horizon Hotel. The parking lot was filled with luxury vehicles. I handed my keys to the valet, tipped him a crisp $5 bill, and walked through the heavy glass doors. The lobby smelled of imported lilies and expensive perfume. A gilded sign pointed the way to the Parker Holden reception. I did not enter the main doors where the ushers were checking names. I knew this hotel. My husband's firm used to host their annual banquets here. I walked down the carpeted side hallway and slipped through the terrace entrance. The ballroom was breathtaking and ridiculous. Thousands of white hydrangeas draped from the ceiling. A custom ice sculpture in the shape of two intertwined swans sat in the center of a massive seafood buffet. The lighting was a soft, romantic amber. 300 guests filled the room dressed in tuxedos and designer gowns. I found a small, empty, high-top table near the back, shadowed by a massive floral pillar. A waiter walked by with a tray of champagne. I politely declined and asked for a glass of sparkling water with a lime. I settled into my chair entirely unnoticed by the crowd. I took a sip of my water, letting the cool glass ground me. The music swelled and the heavy doors opened for the grand entrance. I sat quietly in the shadows, waiting for the final bill to arrive. David and Jessica entered the room to a roar of applause. Jessica wore a gown that easily cost more than my first car. The train swept across the polished dance floor, glittering under the chandeliers. David looked handsome in a custom tuxedo, beaming as he waved to his friends, business partners, and Jessica's extensive family. They took their seats at a sweetheart table elevated on a small stage. I watched the evening unfold with the clinical detachment of an auditor. During the first course, Lobster Bisque, David's best man, gave a speech praising David for finally finding a woman who matches his ambition. Jessica smiled demurely entirely, ignoring the fact that David's ambition was currently being funded by his elderly mother. During the main course, filet mignon and truffle asparagus, Jessica took the microphone. "We wanted tonight to be perfect," she announced, her voice echoing through the speakers. "We decided to spare no expense for the people we truly care about, because family and real friends are what matter most." A woman at a table near me wiped a tear from her eye. I simply crossed my legs and watched the waitstaff pour premium whiskey and vintage wine as if it were tap water. I pulled my phone from my purse. The time was 8:45 p.m. According to standard hotel procedure, the banquet manager would secure the final payment right before the cake cutting and the opening of the late-night premium bar. I opened my banking app. 2 days ago, I had finally made the call. I didn't just lock the card, I permanently closed the entire account line associated with David's name. The representative had warned me that all secondary cards would immediately decline. I had confirmed the request. On the stage, David leaned in to kiss Jessica. He looked like a king, holding court, completely unaware that his kingdom was built on a canceled piece of plastic. At exactly 9:15 p.m., the music transitioned to a soft jazz instrumental. The dessert plates were being cleared. I saw a man in a sharp black suit with a tablet under his arm approach the sweetheart table. The banquet manager. He leaned down and whispered something into David's ear. David smiled easily, nodding. He reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out the heavy metal black card. He handed it to the manager with the casual confidence of a man who had never faced a real consequence in his life. The manager signaled to a female assistant standing near the edge of the stage. She held a wireless payment terminal. She took the card, inserted the chip, and waited. From where I sat, I had a clear view of her face. I saw her eyebrows knit together. She pressed a button on the screen and looked at the manager. The manager stepped down from the stage and looked at the terminal. The machine let out a sharp electronic beep that cut through the soft jazz. I watched the manager lean back toward David. Even from 50 feet away, I could read the shift in David's posture. His shoulders tensed. His smile faltered. "Run it again." I saw David mouth the words. He waved his hand dismissively. "It's a glitch." The assistant wiped the chip on her apron and inserted it a second time. The machine processed for 3 seconds before letting out the exact same sharp, unforgiving tone. Transaction declined. The manager looked at his tablet, then leaned close to David again. I didn't need to hear the words to know what he was saying. "Sir, the account has been closed." I took another slow sip of my sparkling water. The color completely drained from my son's face. The tension on the stage became impossible to hide. Jessica noticed the delay. She put down her champagne glass and leaned over her heavy diamond earrings swinging. I watched her lips move fast, demanding to know what the holdup was. David shook his head, holding his hands up in a placating gesture, but his face was slick with sudden sweat. The banquet manager maintained his professional posture, but his tone was clearly firm. He pointed at the tablet. The final balance was due. The hotel had already provided the dinner and the initial reception based on the deposit, but the open bar, the extended ballroom hours, and the midnight catering required the remaining $58,000 to clear. Guests at the front tables began to notice. The whispering started. "Is something wrong with the cake?" A woman in a green dress asked her husband. "I think there's an issue with the bill," he murmured back. David snatched the card from the assistant and stared at it as if the metal had betrayed him. He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling as he tried to open his banking app. He knew his personal accounts didn't have anywhere near $50,000. Jessica's face turned sour. She grabbed David's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his tuxedo sleeve. David looked up. In a moment of pure desperation, he scanned the massive ballroom, looking for his business partners, his wealthy friends, anyone who could throw him a lifeline. His eyes swept past the ice sculpture, past the floral walls, and traveled all the way to the shadows at the back of the room. His gaze locked onto mine. I did not look away. I did not frown. I simply raised my glass of sparkling water a fraction of an inch in a silent toast. David pushed his chair back so violently it tipped over and hit the floor with a loud thud. The entire ballroom went dead silent. He marched down the steps of the stage, his face flushed and angry mottled red. Every head in the room turned to follow him. He ignored the stairs, striding straight down the center aisle, past his bewildered guests directly toward my small table in the back. He stopped a few feet away, breathing heavily. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, keeping his voice low but vibrating with panic. "I live in this city, David. I go where I please." I replied, setting my glass down. He slammed the black card onto my table. The card declined. "Did you put a freeze on it?" "Unfreeze it right now, Evelyn. They are going to shut down the wedding." I looked at the piece of plastic, then back up at him. "I didn't freeze it. I closed the account." "You closed it." He gasped, his eyes wide. "Are you insane? You promised me that card for emergencies." "A wedding to your mistress is not an emergency," I stated evenly. The silence in the room was so profound that my normal speaking voice carried to the nearest tables. Several guests gasped. David's hands curled into fists. "You are embarrassing me in front of everyone. I am your son. You have the money. Fix this." "I am fixing it," I replied, my voice completely steady. "I am fixing the mistake I made when I allowed you to believe my bank account was your personal playground. You are 38 years old. Pay for your own party." Before David could respond, Jessica arrived. She had hoisted the heavy skirts of her gown and practically sprinted across the room. "What is going on?" she demanded, glaring at me. "David, why is she here? She wasn't invited." "She canceled the card, Jess," David muttered, running a hand over his face. Jessica's eyes widened and then narrowed into thin, vicious slits. She immediately switched tactics, letting her eyes fill with tears. "Evelyn, how could you do this?" She whimpered, her voice loud enough for the audience to hear. "Today is our special day. If you were angry about not being invited, you should have just told us. You didn't have to ruin my wedding out of spite." She expected me to shrink. She expected me to argue back, to look like the bitter, jealous mother-in-law. I stood up, smoothing the front of my charcoal suit. "Jessica," I said, my tone flat and polite, "I am not angry about the invitation. I prefer not to spend my weekends watching people live beyond their means. But since you are wearing a dress paid for by my credit limit and standing in a room secured by my money, I suggest you lower your voice." Her mouth snapped shut. The fake tears stopped instantly. "You ruined my son's first marriage." I continued, looking her dead in the eye. "I did not interfere then, but I will not finance your victory lap. The dress is yours, the dinner is yours, but the open bar is closed." She looked at David, expecting him to defend her, to yell at me. But David wasn't looking at us. He was staring over my shoulder at the banquet manager, who had just walked up with 2 security guards. "Mr. Thornton." The manager said, his voice entirely devoid of warmth, "I need a valid form of payment immediately, or we will be forced to suspend services." David patted his empty pockets. He looked at Jessica. "Do your parents have a card we can use?" Jessica recoiled as if he had slapped her. "My parents already paid for the honeymoon. You told me the reception was handled." "It was," David pleaded, gesturing at me. "Just give them another card, Mom. Please. I'll pay you back. I swear." "Just like you paid back the $50,000 you already spent?" I asked. I picked up my small clutch purse. "No." The manager didn't wait any longer. He tapped a button on his earpiece. "Shut down the premium bars. Kill the music. Turn up the house lights." It happened in an instant. The romantic amber glow vanished, replaced by harsh, bright, fluorescent cleaning lights. The jazz music cut out abruptly, leaving only the awkward hum of the air conditioning. The bartenders at the back of the room immediately began pulling metal grates down over the liquor shelves. The illusion shattered. The guests didn't wait to be asked to leave. Chairs scraped against the floor. People avoided making eye contact with David and Jessica as they rushed toward the coat check. The whispers were no longer quiet. They were loud, embarrassed, and completely focused on the couple standing in the center of the glaringly bright room. David stood paralyzed, his arms hanging uselessly at his sides. Jessica was covering her face, furious and humiliated. I didn't stay to watch the final lights go out. I turned my back on them and walked quietly out the side doors, breathing in the cool night air. I slept deeply that night. There was no tossing, no turning, no anxiety about what the extended family would think. I woke up at 7, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and sat in my sunroom. At 9:30 a.m., I saw David's car pull into my driveway. I watched him walk up the path. He looked exhausted, his tie missing, his shirt wrinkled. He reached the front porch and pulled his key from his pocket. He slid it into the deadbolt and turned. It didn't move. He tried again, rattling the handle. Then he knocked. "Mom, open the door." I walked to the entryway and opened the heavy wooden door, leaving the metal screen door locked between us. "The key doesn't work," he said, holding it up. "I know. The locksmith came yesterday," I answered. "Mom, please. It's a disaster. Jessica is staying at her parents' house. She won't talk to me. The hotel is threatening to send the remaining balance to collections. I need to come in. I need a loan." "I packed your boxes, David. They are on the side of the garage." I pointed down the driveway. "You can take them now." "Are you kicking me out of my own family?" he asked, his voice cracking, finally playing the victim. "No," I replied gently. You walked out of this family a long time ago. I just finally closed the door behind you. I didn't wait for his rebuttal. I stepped back, closed the heavy wooden door, and turned the new solid lock with a satisfying click. I walked back to the kitchen, poured myself a second cup of coffee, and enjoyed the complete, absolute peace of my own home.